250 years ago, women were property, right? So when they got married, and this is all in a heteronormative context because there was no research done otherwise. When women got married, they became their husband's property and everything that they owned became their husband's. As late as 1974, we couldn't have mortgages or credit cards in our own names, even if that money was ours. So of course, we have dysfunctional relationships with money because for the longest time, it didn't belong to us, even if it belonged to us. We had to give it away. So of course, there's holes in the bucket.
This is Only the Bold, where I have deep, riveting, and fascinating conversations with truly phenomenal humans. I'm your gay, ADHD-having, and compulsively curious host, Gia Goodrich, and among many things, I can't get enough of hearing people's incredible stories and getting inside the way their brains work. Each week, I have conversations where we dig below the surface and really uncover everything it takes to live a truly bold life. Despite the messages we get from media and popular culture, the boldest, truest version of yourself is exactly what the world needs. Today's guest is a person who's amassed a deep wisdom and affecting presence from having gone through some serious trials. She's a holistic leadership and mindset coach who works with some of the world's most powerful leaders, as well as those of us who know that we have a well of potential, but we just can't seem to fully access it. She's just meeting me, but I feel like I've known her forever in hearing the beautiful ways she's leveraged some of the most adverse experiences a person can go through, like an autoimmune disease and brain trauma, to have a profound impact on so many by helping them reconnect with their inherent brilliance and by giving them the tools and strategies across multiple modalities that empower, inspire, and that give them a clear path to becoming the most shining version of themselves. She's partnered with progressive companies like Deloitte, Y&R, Outdoor Voices, NYU, and Huge, and has been featured as an expert in places like Goop, The New York Post, NBC, Yahoo, and that's just to name a few. She's transformed countless brains and bodies with her incredible mindset school and personal coaching. She's a North Star for anyone who hopes to live up to their purpose, contribute meaningfully, and live authentically. The beautiful, insightful, and impressively bold soul, Amina AlTai.
Thank you so much for having me, Gia.
You are so welcome and so gracious. For those of you who, depending on what our editor cuts, I just biffed your name multiple times over out of my geekosity. One thing that I just immediately noticed, I'm curious where it comes from with you, is this type of grace in knowing that people are going to fuck up your name. As minorities and people who are growing up in non-dominant culture status, this is something that we've probably always had to deal with. I was the substitute teachers. My heart always sank when people tried to pronounce my name over and over again. What is your relationship to that in relationship to your cultural background and fitting in places where I imagine they're pretty white and monoculture?
I don't know that I fit in a lot of places, but it's such a beautiful question. So my name, Amina, means truthful one. I've always loved my name. I think it's a beautiful name, but it has definitely proven challenging for the spaces in which I grew up. I'm half Iraqi, half Welsh. I was raised between New Jersey and London. And same thing with the substitute teachers. Nobody could ever get my name. I definitely leaned into sort of a graciousness and compassion because I know it's not something that easily rolls off everybody's tongue. Somebody just shows initiative that they want to try to learn how to pronounce it. That is enough for me. The moment where people are like, I'm not going to even bother, I receive that as a microaggression and I don't feel good about that. But when people try, I think it's the most beautiful thing. And I'm just grateful for the trying.
I think I've come to the same place, although it kind of took some years of dealing with my own shame around not being able to fit in, being the one that was always considered to be exotic and weird and different and wanting to hide some of those aspects of myself in order to fit in with all the Kristens and Abbies and all the North Face wearing amazing people that I went to school with who did not have similar cultural backgrounds. So I'm curious for you, because one of the amazing things that I absolutely resonated with you in all of your content is this idea that leaning into your identity and leaning into that inherent worthiness, that inherent thing that you bring to the equation is really where you start to amass the success, you start to heal the body, you start to create the kind of life that is truly what you want. So can you talk a little bit about even how you came to that? Because I feel like that's very counter to what we're socialized to believe.
Yeah, and it's definitely been a journey of unbecoming for me because I grew up in a multicultural, multi-race household. So I have four sisters. I am the darkest of my four sisters, and I was socialized very differently. Like I am a woman of color, and I lived the world that way, and I've experienced the world that way. And they are white passing, and so they've had a very different lived experience to me. And so almost from day one, there was this sort of othering. There were a lot of times where I did feel shame around my identity, particularly in a post 9/11 world. And there was so much reclamation that I had to do around that. There was so much homecoming that I had to do around that. Honestly, my chronic illness was the most healing invitation ever. So I grew up in a home where I was sort of the caretaker and the perfectionist. And I realized very early on that if I do a lot of things for a lot of people, if I do a lot of the caretaking, I will be loved. And so I over rotated into this role of perfectionist and caretaker. And I carried that through to my work. And I basically almost worked myself into the ground. And when I was diagnosed with these two autoimmune diseases, it was this invitation of, do you continue going in this performance piece and pushing and forcing and trying to be something that you're not in a way that is actually killing you? Or do you actually surrender right here and come home to yourself and live the life that you're meant to live and be the human that you're meant to be? It's been a process and a journey, but it's been the most beautiful one. My career has blossomed so much since that point because I worked in marketing and brand management before that, and I was very sort of classically trained. And I even remember when I first came to coaching being like, oh, how am I going to differentiate myself as a coach? And first kind of looking at the market and the white space and designing my business that way. And then I had this light bulb moment one day of like, no, I can't design for the market. I have to design based on my lived experience. People are going to seek me out based on the way that I've walked, the specific teachings that I have because of the way that I've walked. And that is the richest, most authentic, juiciest thing that I could ever give to the world.
It's similar to a framework I've been working with and teaching lately, and basically is what I call your cultural constellation, which is an amalgamation of your identity, experiences, and your values. And that when you put that together, we're all inherently unique. And it's a matter of really uncovering what that uniqueness is for yourself, because some of these things are so even a mystery to us, like they're so automatic in the way that we show up in the world, or we've suppressed that because we've been socialized to think that's what we need to do. And really, when we lean into that, it's like this really powerful thing. And I love that in your work and doing research for this, hearing you talk and the way that you work with clients, it just seems there's like a deep acceptance and generosity to your personhood that allows people to feel like they can really sink into truly being themselves.
Well, thank you. That's just the most generous thing ever. Really, that's such a beautiful offering. Thank you. I received that. That makes me so happy. That really warms my heart.
Let's talk a little bit about hard pivot that you really had to come to in first, really realizing that energy, this corporate world is not for you. And you need to really make this conscious effort to move into a different space because your body was literally telling you like, no, get it together. We're not going to keep going down this path. Can you take us back to that experience and kind of what was going through your mind? Because I think a lot of people are in a similar zone of getting these invitations from their body, from the universe that it's like, hey, you need to change something up. But there's so much fear and resistance that can show up in the same time.
I definitely experienced all that fear and resistance, real talk.
Yeah.
So when I first started my career, I definitely started it based on the shoulds, right? Oh, I should go into marketing and I should take this corporate job, should. So I started out in corporate America and my body had been whispering all along the way. There were little things that weren't, feeling great and maybe my hair was falling out or I was tired. I just kind of ignored it. I was like, oh, this is just how people feel, right? We live fast lives. We get tired. And then I went on to start my own business and I basically carried all of my childhood programming into the business, right? I totally lacked boundaries and I was deeply codependent and I was putting everybody before myself. And it just started to whittle away at me, right? I experienced a deep sense of burnout because the self-care wasn't there, because the boundaries weren't there. Every step of the way were these little whispers, and it might have been something small like, chronic stomach pain or my hair falling out or feeling extremely tired. But I wasn't in a point in my life where I could hear the whispers. I was at a point in my life where I could only hear the shouts, and it had to be sort of this big dramatic crash for me to really wake up. I wish I was somebody that could have heard those whispers, but also I wouldn't have gotten the lesson in the way that I got the lesson so dramatically. And I needed a dramatic change and something radical. And so, I think it really worked out in service to me. But for those that are listening that maybe your body's whispering and you're not ready to listen in, I'd be really curious about why. And If you need to get the lesson the way that I got the lesson, I have all the compassion and love in the world for you too. But if you don't want to let it get that far and you can lean into inquiry and start to go down that rabbit hole of self-discovery and see what's there for you, what familial stories are there for you, what limiting beliefs are there for you, I think it's a really generous gift to yourself.
What you're talking about is exactly a lot of what I've been experiencing, where it's this invitation to come back to, or basically like to strengthen the connection between the body and like your brain. My body has been very similar, I think, to your story. I've run it into the ground over many years. And now, like, one of the ways it's manifesting for me is with so many digestive issues and then neuroinflammation. I have a very hard stop in terms of what I can do in a day, how I can show up, because things will happen like I'll literally lose my words. What I'm fascinated by with you is like the way that you frame all of it. It's really embracing the positive long-term aspect of it, but also not necessarily discounting the toughness of really needing to honor it and step into like the nebulous abyss of what that might mean for everyone.
Yeah. I'm a firm believer that we get our lessons when we get our lessons, and we can't save other people from their lessons. We're going to get it when we get it. Sometimes there's this desire for it to be easier, for it to be different, but it is what it is for us so that the next time around, it is totally different for us and we don't have to walk that way. Especially for those of us that are evolving lineage or healing intergenerational trauma. Maybe there was a lot of hustling through and pushing and instrumentalizing our bodies and it wasn't possible to be any other way. And that's in our cells and in our DNA. So it takes something. It takes a lot from us to actually recreate that behavior, to do something different, to walk a different way. And for a lot of us, it doesn't always feel safe to do that. Sometimes it feels like, well, if we're doing something different to our family system, that we're going to be cast out. And for our brains, right, that feels as if we're going to die. And so it can feel really scary to change the behavior, to go from something that's comfortable. Dysfunction can be really comfortable for a lot of us. And so it can feel really scary to go to something safer, to go to something that is a little bit more in the stretch zone, even if it is better for you, quote unquote.
And I think even tuning in when you are so used to having a disconnected relationship to your body and the impulses that are coming from it. And I'm sure for many of your clients, like that first kind of opening up to it feels scary. Like even to me, like closing my eyes and being alone with my brain and body for any period of time, the conscious part of me is like, nope, we don't want to do that. Let's do like anything else other than strengthen this connection. But then there's also this awareness that it's on the other side of that, that all of these desires and like life vision live.
I think our ability to grow is directly proportional to our ability to have tough conversations, to look at the tough stuff and hear truth about ourselves.
Which sucks. Amina, please.
I know. It can be real hard sometimes. And there are days that I don't feel available for it too. There are days that I'm like, yeah, give me all the truth. Like, I want to see, hold up the mirror. Let's go deep. And there are days that I feel like Bambi, who is just learning to walk, and I cannot take another truth today. So I think context is really important.
So in those moments, you have all the tools, you show up in this really brilliant way with and for other people. What does that internal dialogue sound like? You understand you're like not in an optimal zone. You can feel it maybe sliding into an area that feels familiar, but is not healthy. What's that internal experience that helps bring you back to yourself or a higher version of yourself?
I call it the pit. So when I'm in the pit, I allow myself to be in the pit. I'm somebody that historically has avoided messiness. Like I have been allergic to messiness. I don't like mess and I don't like discomfort. I don't like staying in the discomfort. So I'm always like, let's get to action. So for me, it's actually really important that I sit and I feel my feelings for a little bit. So I allow myself to be in the pit and to feel the feelings, like whether it's anger, sadness, grief, resistance, to feel it. And then I get really curious about what it's about. So I don't allow myself to stay in the pit forever. And at this point in my life, I allow myself actually a time limit of being in the pit. And I don't recommend that to everybody. Everybody's different. But I'm like, okay, you get an hour to be in the pit. And you get to understand why you're there. And then you get to take steps to get yourself out of the pit lovingly. And some things may take longer than others, particularly around grief and things like that are a little bit deeper. It's always about the forward momentum and being compassionate with ourselves as we're getting there.
Yeah. Well, let's talk more about some of these frameworks because I just love even the way that you can distill information. To me, that's one of the powers. A super amazing teacher or healer is somebody who can take something that's like a nebulous kind of concept that's hard to wrap your brain around and can just synthesize it in a way that you're like, ooh, I really like that. And I'm just thinking, like, in researching some of your stuff and listening, there are just these phrases that you say, like, people are married to their fear, or there's a lineage of belief, or things like that reshape some of these ideas in a way that really makes it concrete. So can you share some of like the way that you see the world and kind of the way you help people move through some of this sticky stuff?
Well, you're so generous and kind. I'm so appreciative of all of your reflections. So thank you. I'm a very literal person. So as I'm learning these tools, I always need to make it make sense for my brain. So I'll take things in and I'll be like, oh, okay, I really appreciate the way that this was taught and I understand the essence of this teaching. But for me to really take it in, for me to really change my life, this is how I need to understand it and work with it. So I think my own brain has been helpful in kind of creating these frameworks. It's just I'm a literal person and I need to see things sequentially and in a framework to really get it. I think the most beautiful thing about being human is that we can grow and we can change and that we can change our beliefs. And I think that underpins everything that I do, whether it's around money or it's around spirituality or it's around our work. We have the opportunity to look at what isn't working and then really stretch into what we desire. And I think this is such a beautiful time to be alive because I think now more than ever, we have opportunities to step into what we desire, particularly marginalized folks. Not that it's a great time, but it's a better time than previous years. And I think that there's more opportunity than there has been. I think that these tools can help us get to that next level and claim everything that we desire. Like I'm really committed to helping people of color and marginalized communities really change their relationship with money because money isn't just about the money. Money is what we can do with the money, right? And there's all this data and research to suggest that when women have more money and when people of color have more money, we reinvest it in our families, our communities, and the greater good. And so by shifting our brains, by shifting our relationships with certain things, we can change the world. And I think that that is the most amazing thing ever and the most inspiring thing ever. And it gets me out of bed every single day. So I don't even know if I answered your question. I feel like I just went on a tangent, but
I think that's great. Like just claim that soapbox. It makes me so happy. Well, I think money, like there's just so much stickiness around it, particularly for minorities. I can speak from personal experience. Like there has just been so much around deservedness, so much around lack, because it's two things, right? Making money and keeping money. And so for the first like level up, it was very much for me, it was like, oh, I need to be like a high earner. And I worked into being somebody who commanded really large fees for what I did. And that felt really good. But then what I also realized is I had holes in my bucket that got big enough to compensate for the new amount of money that I was making. So what are some of those patterns, I guess, that you see that you really end up addressing with those of us that are really wanting to work into a new relationship around it?
The patterns are all over the place. Yes, from people being able to earn a lot but not hold on to it, or not being able to earn, not feeling worthy of earning, really struggling to have sales and money conversations because they're ashamed of it. And it's really interesting. So I love digging into the history, particularly with women and money. So like 250 years ago, women were property, right? So when they got married, and this is all in a heteronormative context because there was no research done otherwise. When women got married, they became their husband's property and everything that they owned became their husband's. As late as 1974, we couldn't have mortgages or credit cards in our own names, even if that money was ours. So of course, we have dysfunctional relationships with money because for the longest time, it didn't belong to us, even if it belonged to us. We had to give it away. So of course, there's holes in the bucket.
Thinking about time-wise, like I think my mom was in high school in the mid 70s. And so thinking that this hasn't been very long at all, that we've even had the ability to be able to really take ownership of it. I certainly have a tendency of really focusing on the now so much and having this unrealistic expectation of where the future is and really trying to work on looking back at where I've been or looking back at history and saying like, hey, you're in a good place. You need to like ease up on the self-judgment. And money is definitely a place that I do that because I think for people who are taking non-traditional routes, like I have a friend from high school that I just fucking love. She got a job in real estate right out of college. And then she and her husband have been contributing together and she's been building this career. And so their money situation is very different. And the assets that they've accumulated and all of that is like very American dreamy. The little kid version of me is like, fuck, like, you know, we go to a wedding or something and me thinking, what would it have been like had I been able to be a person like that? But then also, like, there's just no fucking way I would have been able to with my with my brain and kind of purpose that I've always had.
I say this to my clients all the time, even the people that make us a little jealous. Jealous is a very helpful emotion because it shows us what's inherent in us, but is unexpressed that we're seeing in the other person. Sometimes I feel like it's an invitation. Maybe there's a part of you that wants more passive revenue streams or something, but I think there's a really beautiful invitation inside of that inspiration. And also, we can't change our past.
Well, let's talk more about like some of these insights or like some of these phrases that you end up really saying a lot with clients. In the patterns that we can really start to get a picture and not feel so alone in what it is we might personally be rocking with.
I basically coach high achieving women who are just total amazing humans, badasses in the world, and really here to make the world a better place. They wouldn't describe themselves that way. They would be a lot more humble, but they are just the most epic humans you've ever met. A lot of them really struggle with imposter syndrome, and I find that language problematic. I don't know if you saw the Harvard Business Review article, but basically they were like, we're calling women imposters, but it's actually the structure of the organization that is making us feel that way, and we're pathologizing something. They are feeling those sentiments, though. So a lot of them don't necessarily feel worthy. They don't feel like they're worthy of their accomplishments or their salary or the praise. A lot of them are worried about judgment. I'm constantly having the conversation with clients of what other people think of us is none of our business, right? And if it was, we would have been born with the ability to read minds, and we were not, thankfully. So I think really the worthiness piece, the imposter syndrome or inequity quotient, as I call it, really sort of just taking ownership of our lives and not living for what other people think of us.
You're somebody who's interviewed a lot. Like there are some key core topics that are brought up a lot with you. What is it that you find yourself not really getting the chance to talk about more because you're constantly brought back to some of these really important, but some of these more consistent aspects to your story?
So when I first started speaking on podcasts and speaking on stages, one of the things that I would talk about was a nourishment inside of my work. My work sits at the intersection of leadership/business coaching, mindset, and wellness, because I believe we need to look at all three parts to really thrive. And so when I first started speaking, I would share a lot on the wellness piece and how nourishment was a conduit to clarity, right? Because we can't be clear about our purpose and our careers and our businesses if we're not taking care of a vessel of our human suit. So we really need to take care of this. I'm the multi-hyphenate, the multi-passionate. So I'm always learning new things and I get excited about the new things, and then I bring them into my teachings. And so the teachings are ever evolving. One area that I'm focused on moving forward that I'd love to share a little bit about is on really supporting diverse leaders. I define diverse as BIPOC, LGBTQIA folks and women who are in the context of an organization or their own business, and they are not supported properly, right? So we've seen all these studies over the course of the last year, particularly about how people aren't thriving at work. I created this program that was meant to not just coach the underrepresented leader, because that's who I coach in my practice. And we put up a lot of onus and emotional lift on this individual to kind of grow and to be the change, but then things around them don't change as much. And I was like, oh, that's kind of problematic, right? That we're asking these individuals to do all the change and then we're not seeing the change around them. So what I'm working on right now is a corporate offer that is a 360 coaching program to coach the diverse leader, their peers, the sponsor, and the people that roll up into them to really drive systemic change.
One of the hallmarks of tokenism is that like all the pressure is on you. I was a commercial photographer until the pandemic, essentially. And then I eased off of that a little bit more and more into content creation. I really was the person that in a lot of these rooms was looked to reflect and to catch blind spots. And the whole idea about emotional labor, I think, didn't really resonate with me for a long time. I guess the framework I was operating with was like, but this is what I'm good at. This is what I'm here for. I'm fine. I've always been an other. Like, this is great. But then in reflecting more in the last couple of years, I really did start to see how much of total amount of energy is like 100% of the pie, right? At least 40%, and like I'm being generous here, was going to a lot of that effort. Whether it was like having to thwart microaggressions or, like be gracious in the face of and like have to regulate myself, or having to think about the ways things could play out, or trying to think about who's not being represented, like all of this kind of stuff. And then you look at your colleagues who don't 100% of their pie is dedicated to their superpower zone, then it does start to feel like, wow, this is deeply fucked up, but I don't know how to fix it.
So one of the things I've also been talking a ton about lately is burnout, because hello, we are also burned out, and women of color are more burned out than anybody else because of exactly what you're talking about. I was leading a corporate workshop on this recently, and I was thinking about burnout and really sort of precursors to it. And I was like, I think there's 4 things inside of it. I think that there's our visible labor, like we're all working too much. There's the invisible labor. So the invisible labor is the work that is unseen and we don't get paid for, like the emotional labor that you're talking about. There is our biology. We have higher propensity for burnout, just biologically. And then the 4th part is tolerations, tolerating things that we don't need to be tolerating. But just going back to the invisible labor part, the piece that you were just talking about right now is at home, we do 4 times more invisible labor. And in the context of work, we are 70% more likely to volunteer for the invisible labor or be asked to do the invisible labor, and we don't feel like we can say no. And I think that's perpetuating burnout in such a big way because that's 40% that could be used in service to your genius, but has to be used in this other way. And imagine if you could reclaim that.
It's kind of a difficult thing to even imagine because in like looping back to this idea of if your superpower is in a dance with your cultural constellation or like your identity. And so that's a part of what makes you unique and amazing. And this is like 100% a thinking error, right? But like, this is like what the socialized part of me is thinking. Is it fair then to expect that people aren't going to ask me to do this invisible labor or I'm not going to need to step up to do this invisible labor because I'm more qualified to do it? And as I hear myself say that, it's just a beautiful reflection of like the gaslighting, brainwashing energy that I've probably experienced my entire life. Because I think there is on some level a part of me that maybe doesn't even fully believe that there should be as much ease in my experience as my white cis hetero dude bro counterparts are experiencing. They certainly feel entitled to it.
I'm so with you. I think the boundaries come into play so big here and us feeling like we actually have permission to even set the boundary. I remember like having a conversation similarly around this in a slightly different cultural context, but just noticing my own overgiving and really what was underneath that. And I came to realize that both culturally and in my family system, yes was tied to my survival. Because I was a yes person, I got the accolades and I survived and I got through okay. And then I was terrified to say the no because the opposite was true, right? If yes was survival, no felt like death. But I got to the point where I was so burned out that I really had to change the relationship there, but it didn't feel safe to set the boundaries. I remember saying to a therapist at the time, am I allowed to set this boundary? And she's like, what do you mean, are you allowed? Of course you're allowed to set the boundary. It's your boundary. But I think it goes back to what you're saying about sort of this like brainwashing, and we all experience it in some way.
So do you feel like when you look back now, the experience of your body just being like, nope, we're going to shut down until you figure out yourself and how to operate in a way that's like aligned with who you are? Do you feel like some of what you needed to do to heal that over giving and all of that kind of energy?
Oh, 100%. It's absolutely tied. And my theory is as humans, like we all have different kind of quote unquote soft spots, sort of different areas where we get invited to grow. Mine always happens to be through my body. It's just the way I was designed. And so the invitations to grow, the shouts, the whispers all come that way. But I think that we each have sort of different trajectories. We have these different soft spots, but it was absolutely tied to my burnout, to where I arrived and where I am now.
So have you heard of like Dr. John Sarno's work about TMS? I interviewed, one of the first podcast episodes was with somebody who trained with him for many years and then broke off and has been doing her own like amazing work. And like her podcast is called The Cure for Chronic Pain. But one of the things that she leans on as part of the modalities is this type of writing that really creates a way for your subconscious or your body or whatever to communicate with you, but that you have to get it out. And I know there are so many practices that you engage with and like so much that you've learned over all of your studies, but like if you could distill it as much as possible, like what were some of those core practices that really allowed your body to feel safe and to start to heal in a way that was really supporting you? Because I can tell you right now, I'm like semi-functioning, but the thought of really having a fully healed body to be able to like eat food and not worry what's going to happen, to feel like I wake up and I just have more energy than I know what to do with, feels like an alternate universe that is in no way close to happening. And yet I know people like you and like many others who've been able to traverse this type of health gap that it's just like, of course it can happen. But I think that there's some stickiness where it just becomes so hard to believe when you get so used to the way your reality looks.
Yeah. First of all, I'm sending you so much love because I know that moment and how it feels, and it's so challenging. And just my heart goes out to you. And I really hope that you get to experience the joy and the energy and feeling like you can eat everything and be free in your body. Because I've been right there and it is so, so, so tough. So I just want to say that first and foremost.
Thank
Sending you
you.
love. Yeah. I think for me, it was really a journey. When I first was diagnosed with my autoimmune diseases, I was diagnosed with celiac disease and Hashimoto's. And so with celiac disease, the first thing is like you have to change how you're eating, right? Because you can't eat gluten or any gluten grains. And, you just have to really look at your food and your plate. So that was step one. And then as soon as I started to feel sort of like lighter and more energized in my body, I was like, oh, I'm ready to move. And movement was sort of this natural progression. After that, I had left my company and I was sort of back on my entrepreneurial journey. And I was working with somebody who was a transcendental meditator. There was this workshop and she's like, oh, you should come. And it ended up being for Vedic meditation. I had tried lots of different modalities and then I tried Vedic meditation and that was the thing for me. It was as if my brain felt at home and like safe to relax. I came across this meditation that was really, really supportive of me. And then I did a meditation training because I was like, I want to be able to offer different modalities to my clients and help them see which ones are really supportive of them. And so every space got me a little clearer and a little stronger so then I could go on to the next space. It continues to be that way, but it's not to say that I haven't had sort of setbacks. I feel like my health journey has been like a little bit of a cha-cha, sometimes like one step forward, two steps back. And you had mentioned this in my intro of, having a traumatic brain injury. So a couple of years ago, I had mold poisoning and the mold poisoning led to a traumatic brain injury, basically like a chemical injury. And it was after several years of feeling really great. And then all of a sudden, I literally felt like I was dying on my feet. Like I'm a really high energy human and I could like barely move across the room and I couldn't remember my thoughts and my hair was falling out again and just everything was going wrong. And I was like showing antibodies for like 7 different autoimmune diseases. And I was like, this can't be right. I went through like maybe 5 to 7 different doctors, eventually came to Gabrielle Lyon. In my first session with her, she looked at me and she's like, I think it's mold. And she was like, I will stop at nothing to get you well. And having somebody on your team that is just so committed to getting you well, that is there for you, that was everything for me because I was at that point where I was just like, am I just the type of person that's just going to kind of, be up and down and not feel at home in my body? And like, is this going to be my reality? Right. And she was like, no, I'm not allowing that to be your reality. I'm like super type A and a very good student. So everything that she told me to do, I did to the T because I was like, I'm getting better. I'm not staying here. It was amazing. And within months, I started to feel like myself again, and to the point that I forgot what it felt like to not feel like myself. And I was like, that is the biggest freaking gift, that I forget what it felt like to be that low. So that's a really long way of saying, like, I think it's been sort of sequential and one door opens another door and it's not linear. And I'm sending you the most love.
Thank you. Well, we love Dr. Gabrielle Lyon over here because she is the best. But I think that role of somebody who you can just feel it emanate from them, the unwavering belief that you will get better, that you can achieve what you set out to do, like that kind of, when you can be riddled with so much doubt and feelings of unworthiness, having that person as that anchor, I think, is so deeply transformational. And so I'm curious for you, because you are obviously that person to so many people now. What are some of the transformations that you've been able to see in people who've worked with you that maybe they didn't think was possible? And now they're like, of course, this is great.
Yeah. It's so inspiring. I love the humans that I get to work with. They're incredible. So the way that I really enter the work with people is through career or business. So that's when people come to me when the pain point is around their day job, or they want to start their own thing, or, they're not even feeling good inside their own thing. But really the entry point for me is career. I would say some of the best case studies is last year I worked with somebody, she's totally amazing. She was a rock star in the healthcare world, but she had an unfortunate work experience and basically left and then wanted to start her own thing. She wasn't sure if she could, and she had lots of different ideas and wasn't sure how to synthesize them into something that would work. And questioning herself every step of the way, like we all do. It was, we all kind of walk that way and we're like, are we good enough? And can we do this thing? And does the world want it? Asking ourselves all those questions. And so she is about to hit her first year in business and she's about to cross 7 figures. And I just think that that is just so freaking amazing. And I was telling her, I was like, do you realize how amazing this is? First of all, less than 2% of women cross 7 figures. And you know how many of them do it in 1 year? Way less. So this is celebratory. This is huge. So that's one example. And then also she's like, and that's spilling over everywhere. It's not just about the money, right? She's happier in her family. She's able to give more. She's traveling more. She's doing the things that she loves. She's basically creating a micro economy with her business. Like there's so many beautiful things that you can do when that part feels good. Another example was somebody who was working in DEI. They were a lawyer and they were just feeling like really unseen in their job. And I would echo that. I feel like they really did not see the brilliance and the talent that they had there. And within 3 months, we were like, okay, what's the dream? Let's get you to the dream. We basically got her to one of the world's most coveted companies. And wait for this, she tripled her salary. Tripled.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah. And think what she can make possible now that she's resourced and supported. She was kind of getting to a space of disillusionment of thinking that, this is work that she really wanted to do, but feeling like her company wasn't behind it. Does anybody care about it? And now she's at this company that values it so much that they're paying her 3 times what she was making before, has given her a healthy budget to really do this work across the organization. And she's re-enlivened around it. And so, yeah, some of the magic.
That's so amazing and so expansive also, because I think that a lot of the work that you do is around some of these deeply embedded subconscious beliefs and stories. Can you talk to us more about that? Because my brain is like, bing, 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 bing. Like, is it like, should we hear about yours that you're still rocking with, or like some of the people that you work with, or the ones you come across most often? So I'll leave it to you to direct us in terms of where we go with this. But this morning, I was watching this show where they were doing past life regressions on YouTube.
Oh, I love a past life regression.
I was just like, what? And there's some show where not only do they do it, but then they fact check it. And so depending on what this person is talking about, they like go through census records. There's one that I was watching. This woman was talking about living in Jerusalem in the year 1206. We'll have to link in the show notes because it was wild. And she was talking about how she was cast out of society because she wasn't fertile, but she was using words in a different language and then saying what those words meant.
Whoa.
When they went back to fact check it, they were like, yes, I think it's like Salic law was something that existed around this time. It gives me goosebumps just kind of. And she was like,
Whoa.
I speak English and a tiny bit of Spanish. And like, I have no idea where this came from. And there's a part of me that is so excited by all of that. And like, so like just feels like a kid who's going to New York for the first time. It's Times Square and like your eyes are just so bright. But if I'm being honest, there's also this other part of me that is really nervous and like feels this sort of dis-ease around the idea that so much of the show is being run by things that I don't understand. And that in the case of this woman, she was in her current life almost compulsively being an egg donor to a level where it was like potentially impacting her ability to have kids. And then they regressed to this lifetime where she was this woman who was totally cast out because of her inability to have kids. And so it's like, even thinking about, oh my gosh, I have so much bullshit from this lifetime. And then there's so much bullshit that's like generational. And then are there other lifetimes that I'm rocking with? Just feels like insurmountable.
It's a lot, especially if we look at it all at once. And so I think the invitation really is like, let's go a step at a time too. Because I totally hear what you're saying of like, oh my God, there's the limiting beliefs over here. There's the intergenerational trauma over there. Now there's past lives in here.
Yeah.
And who knows what else, right? So I agree with you. Just like it's a lot and one step at a time. But I think past lives are so interesting and all of it's information, right? And we get to decide what is relevant and resonant with us and what we really want to use for our healing and what we don't. And so there are times with clients, if I feel like I can't get deep enough on the core limiting belief side of things or the, really understanding the lineage of beliefs, that I will refer them out to do past life regressions because I think that there's so much information there. And again, sometimes it's a metaphor, right? If you have trouble believing that this happened for you, then let's look at it as a metaphor. And if that metaphor makes sense for your life, then there's some healing to be had there too. It all sort of gets in there at different angles and we get to go one step at a time. If we feel like this tool isn't working, we can look at the next tool and the next tool. And maybe we don't need all the tools. Maybe we just need one tool. Everybody's different.
Okay, so what other modalities or areas are you fascinated by?
I love human design. Human design is a really big one. I always send my clients to get their charts done because it has big implications for our work. Past life regression. I also studied shamanic Reiki and Lao Chi. And so that's a part of my work too. It's like low key on the down low, but I bring all of me into the space so it comes in. Meditation's a big part of the work. And then I have this sort of, classic business marketing background that's a part of it as well, plus my leadership coaching. So it's this real mixed bag. Soul retrieval really fascinates me as well.
I've never even heard of it.
So basically, there are traumatic moments in our lives where our soul, quote unquote, fractures for survival. So let's say we experience something really big and it doesn't feel safe to be all of us. The soul kind of splinters off. And so that splintering of the soul can impede us as we're thinking about purpose or rising to the next level. And so if we feel like we're looping on a particular issue or we can't push past a certain ceiling, there might be some soul retrieval that needs to be done. And it's sort of reclaiming the soul that's shattered and splintered in that moment so that we're moving forward in more of a whole way. So there's so many beautiful tools out there. I work with a shaman, and that's always been so profound for me. Shamanic journeying has been amazing, drumming, like vibrational medicine. I'm just fascinated by a lot of things. And my MO is, in Vedic philosophy, they say go towards what charms you. And that's kind of what I do. And so if there's a body of work that's charming me, I'll kind of dig deeper and I'll learn more about it, from neuroscience to shamanism. Like it really goes like Eastern, Western, all the ways. And I say the same thing to my clients of go towards what charms you. If there's a body of work that I'm introducing that doesn't resonate with you, let's not use it. Let's look at something else.
Dr. Joe Dispenza talks about the language of the time, and that like right now, because we speak science and we value science, that some of the work he's doing is merging these different modalities with the trials to be able to make it very clear and kind of frame it in a language that people can't just totally disregard because that's the language we speak. But I think that that kind of contextualizing is just really fascinating. I grew up in a very like specific skeptical mode, but that was my mode that I chose because I saw how other people were treated. And so I was like, I want to be a serious person. I want to show up this way. I want to make moves in my life. I'm going to just leave all that stuff over there as like hogwash and like keep going. But then the universe has like a great way of just smacking you lovingly across the ass to let you know like, hey babe, how about this? And I feel like I've definitely very recently have been vibrationally hit by this tidal wave. There's a lot that you have not been looking at that is impacting your life. If you would be able to open to it, then your life would go a lot easier. For example, I had 3 different unrelated, unprompted people talk about like my throat chakra. And they were just like that is so tightly clamped. It's like, how can you disregard it when people who have like not touched you, not known anything about you, not had any other frame of reference than just feeling your energy, all 3 say the same thing. But there's also something really exciting about all these different modalities and being able to like think about the menu that you can choose from of ways to see the world that might heal you and serve you if you're able to be open to it. But I imagine that for not only myself, but for other people, it can be very scary opening to the possibility of things like past lives or soul retrieval or like ancestors that hang around and like want to connect with you.
Totally. Especially those of us that maybe grew up in super religious or purist culture, like it can feel really challenging to have those conversations. Like I grew up in quite a religious family, and I was sort of the first one to be like, and look at all these modalities. And, I talked to the ancestors. And I resisted that for a very long time. Like even when I went to college, I studied marketing and economics, and my rationale was I want to be equally right and left-brained because I came from this family system that really valued the sciences and the maths and like a very particular way of being. And I remember like really kind of dipping my toe into like, okay, I'm going to do this marketing over here. And that's like really pushing the boundaries. And so like, as I got older and got more excited and realized that these modalities were super helpful in healing, there was definitely a lot of sideways glances. But when people saw my transformation, they were really ready to listen. I mean, not that they wanted to necessarily take it on for themselves, but it piqued curiosity in them. And they were like, wow, this is possible for you. Maybe it's possible for me too.
I used to be very kind of evangelical about things that I liked. Like my mom always jokes that I was a walking infomercial where it's like, nobody asked for this. But I'm like, let me tell you all the features and why you need this in your life. That idea of leading by example is so much more powerful when somebody asks you what you've been doing because you're literally glowing. That's way different than being like, hey guys, so I want to tell you about this really amazing thing.
Yeah. So I think I have definitely spent some time as an infomercial as well. I'm right there with you.
I feel like I am being asked to not oversteer. And I'm kind of just like getting this vibe that if I try to direct the conversation too much, like there's something that I'm going to miss. Does that make sense?
Who's saying that you oversteer?
My internal monologue.
Where my brain went was the spirit guides were saying that.
Grandma Duchess, can you please keep it down? I'm like trying to do stuff over here. I'm definitely not there yet. And what's funny is actually in that Reiki session, the most recent one, they were saying that you have like ancestors and guides around you that very much want to talk to you. And you are like hard, clamped, closed to it. So there's like an invitation there. And my brain went like, whoop. No, thank you. I want to feel like I'm sitting alone by myself when I think I'm sitting alone by myself. But I also feel like it's like the, the little kid energy in me that like I'm slowly able to release and unfurl over time. But it's kind of tricky, the idea of like really needing to release.
I think there's some surrender involved there too. But I mean, the way that I learned to practice sort of psychic connection with my teacher, you don't have to be available all the time. You get to set the terms on when you're available and when you want to connect. I lost my grandpa a few years ago, and he was one of the most instrumental people in my whole life, like the most amazing human. And it was devastating to lose him. And I sat down with my teacher at the time, and she was like, well, you can still connect with him. And so she taught me how to connect with him. And it's been such a beautiful practice. And it's on my terms. It's not like he's popping in as a ghost, which is nice.
Hey, girl, hey.
I feel like peeing my pants constantly.
Right. Well, my startle reflex is like perma 10 anyways. That would be really intense to have like spirits popping in from around the corner. But what's like some of those techniques that you've used to connect, and what are some of the ways that you've experienced your grandfather's presence?
One of my really good friends, her name is Deganit Noor. She is a doctor of traditional Chinese medicine. She's an acupuncturist and she's an intuitive. And she has a school called Nirvana. And she basically teaches you how to get in touch with your psychic ability. Inside of clairvoyance, there are 5 different clairs. There's clairvoyance, which is the ability to see. There's clairaudience, which is the ability to hear. There's clairsentience, which is feeling, etc. And so she teaches you how to get in touch with these clairs. And there's different tools like inviting in ancestors or reading energy. And so she teaches you these different tools. And it's been just so helpful because I experienced a tremendous amount of grief when I lost my grandfather, and grief is love with no place to go. And so it was really powerful to actually have a place to put this love, to be able to still connect with this human, not human anymore, but this ancestor, this spirit, this energy. And so it's been so healing.
That's why I love having these conversations, because I feel like there's an internal knowing part of me that's like, bring it. Like, let's just drink from the fire hose of spirituality. Let's get this done. Let's like elevate like nobody's business. And then there's kind of this protective energy that I experience as a type of skepticism that is very similar. Like if you think career-wise, I think there's like a very close link to the way I experience is like this desire to play small, keep things safe. Like my dad said at one point, he's like, I definitely feel like you're like Ferrari. You'll be going like full tilt down the Autobahn, and then you'll just like randomly jerk the emergency brake. And I don't understand why. And I'm like, I don't either. But that is true of who I am. There is this protective energy that is very much nervous around what even life would be like. From an emotional place, I experienced a lot of grief early in my 20s, my late teens and early 20s. And I think there was just like a part of me that just clamped down and was like, this is how we can make our way through the world. And like, so let's operate from this way.
Do you believe that you can have everything that you desire?
I'm like, yes, but I think I don't know. I think maybe.
What are you afraid would happen if you had everything that you desired?
That I would still be unhappy or empty. I actually had a session with like an intuitive yesterday, and we met over Zoom. She was amazing, but she was just like, I'm just tuning into your energy right now. I'm just seeing what you're giving me. And she had said, oh, you're like this really strategic person. You have this ability to put thoughts together, blah, 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 blah. People really respect that, yada, yada. And I'm also sensing this like deep emptiness. And I was just like, whoa, I don't even think I had language for that until it was presented to me yesterday. And I was like, yeah, there is this like really intense emptiness that I'm sure is, tied to all of it.
Can we go deeper? Do you want to?
Okay. Yeah.
Where do you think this emptiness manifests most in your life? Which area? Is it career? Is it body? Is it relationships? Relationship to self? Finances?
It's probably between career and relationship to self.
So if there were a story that you were telling yourself about career connected to the emptiness, what would that story be?
That I'll always be like climbing and seeking and searching, and it will never be enough. And like, no matter how much other people appreciate, and no matter how much effect or change or contribution that's there, I will still never be able to experience it as anything other than like pop rocks.
Do you believe that's true? That you'll always be climbing and seeking and it'll never feel enough?
I haven't ever felt any other way through my experience.
Let's add until now at the end
Yes.
of that.
Yeah. Until now.
What would enough feel like? And I'm a stand for radical up level. And I believe that there are seasons in our careers where we need to grow incrementally. And I believe there are seasons where we can have a radical up level. If I were to wave the wand and give you the experience of your dreams that would feel enough, that would feel more than enough, what would that look like?
I would have this company that is providing educational tools and also incubating people to help them be able to transform their life story and who they are into these meaningful assets through podcasts and YouTube and things like that. And that I would experience this sense of meaningful contribution and also like an ease in things, like a trust in the team, in the mechanism that's been built, and know that I contribute something meaningfully, but it could run without me. And I feel like a sense of freedom around my time and energy. So I can also connect.
Powerful. I feel like the dream is clear. And the really important piece that I'm hearing too is context. If you want to design this thing, but in a way that you don't always have to lift it, that you can be free and there can be ease and trust and you can have team to support you. If you were to live into that vision, how would that feel? You're smiling like so big.
Well, I was hearing the but, like the
Tell me the but. Tell me the but.
Like the but to me is like recognizing the chasm between where I'm at and how I'm feeling and like that place.
What needs to happen for you to get there?
Just so many things. And because of where I'm at, trying to manage my brain and food and energy and attention and team and content, it just feels like a chicken and the egg sort of thing. That it's like, in order to have the support and the clarity and the vision and the rocket fuel to progress, I need to have done enough on my own. But like the doing it, and I say on my own, like I already have amazing people that I work with, but it just feels like a chicken and the egg sort of thing.
Yeah, I totally hear you. And I really, again, want to honor you for like all the invisible labor that it takes to take care of yourself, to feel like you can show up for this work before you can even think about a bigger vision. What would it look like for you to get free today? Because inside of that context, I also heard freedom. Like you want to design this big, beautiful thing, but you really want to feel free. You want to feel easeful. In the next couple days, what would it look like for you to get free? What would you need to change? What would you need to put down? What would you need to give to yourself to get free right away?
I feel like I would need an internal map for what I need to do in terms of routine and managing energy and all of that stuff. And then I feel like I would need like an external map and route that I can like trust in. So similarly, like when you said, Dr. Gabrielle Lyon was like, here are the steps. I feel like I need internally what I need to do and also externally to believe that like there is an ability to get there.
What needs to happen for you to get the internal map?
Well, I have to do it, but it involves like being quiet with myself and like overcoming the resistance. And there are always like really loud things that need my attention that I would rather procrastinate with.
The freedom is like coming to the surface, right? Like you're asking to get free and there's this emptiness that's happening because you're not arriving there. And so what would it look like to radically prioritize your getting free, that internal map, and forgetting that long list just temporarily, just to support yourself?
I mean, I guess like taking baby steps, not releasing the pressure of everything.
I love that. And compassion, and Rome wasn't built in a day, and you can take one step towards the internal map. It doesn't mean you have to do the whole overhaul today, but one step towards prioritizing it is one step towards feeling more free. And then do you feel like you have resources for the external part, the routine and the mapping energy?
I don't. I feel like the way my brain works is that I have very clear visions and I'm very strategic, but if it's too close, I can't. Like I need someone else to bounce things off of that has more experience than me instead of me being the one that's driving and pushing, working all the levers.
Okay, beautiful. And I work that way too. Like I can see everybody else's stuff a mile away. And when
Yeah.
it comes to my own stuff, I'm like, wait, someone hand me a mirror. I can't see anything. I'm always being coached for that reason because all humans have blind spots. So what would resources look like to support you there? Does that mean community? Does that mean coach? Does that mean a friend? What does that look like for you?
I think it means like coaching and mentorship. And that feels like really good to me. I think and kind of like what I've started to cultivate, but it's been in sort of this splatter paint way, right? So it's like I just started working with an intuitive coach, and then I'm probably working with this high powered executive coach who just canceled our first session because I didn't complete all the homework in time. So I was like, okay. Basically, one of my mechanisms for procrastination has been like seeking knowledge instead of taking aligned action. Like a great example, I spent $10,000 once on a course that like I never used because it wasn't like the right thing for me. I'm also experiencing like resistance around that aspect of it too.
Yeah, like trusting yourself. I know that you downloaded my inequity quotient, and inside of it, I talk about the 5 archetypes inside of imposter syndrome, which needs a rebrand for everybody listening. But the seeking knowledge piece, there's an archetype in there called the expert, and the expert believes that we can't go out into the world until we know everything. It's a stalling tactic because it is virtually impossible to know everything. If we did know everything, we'd be God, Goddess, the universe. And so the invitation with the expert is to lovingly go out the door at 80% and to practice that until that's a real muscle for you. How does that feel?
That feels deeply accurate. It's not without a sense of irony that this is part of what I talk about for my actual job that I'm also not necessarily applying. So like an example is I launched a course in August that went really well, but I haven't launched it again because I don't feel ready, and I've been hard on myself about what it was versus what I think it should have been and all that kind of stuff.
I love it. I love this journey for you.
I love you.
I love you too. Thanks for letting me go there with you.
Absolutely. I really appreciate it. Also, like, I just feel selfish. You know what I mean? Like, I didn't necessarily mean to usurp your time like that.
It's not a selfish thing at all, in my perspective, because if you choose to share this as well, I think it helps lots of people too. And I think that's the most selfless thing that we can do. Also, it's so vulnerable, which is the most generous thing.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate that. I am like an oversharer. That at least is one of my superpowers, is that like I'm definitely willing to put it out there in the hopes that somebody else will be able to see themselves reflected in some capacity and like learn in real time, which is very scary, but is also, I think, helpful for other people, but also for myself. So yeah. I love you. I want to work with you. Okay, so let's talk about this. I know you have so many offerings. Like, what are some of the best ways that people can engage with you based on where they're at?
Yes. So I really tried to structure things for every point on the journey. When I was really designing my offering, I was thinking about me and all the different pivot points. You know, when I first came to coaching and didn't have a ton of money, when I was a bit more seasoned and I needed a little bit of support, but maybe it was group. And so the ways to work with me, you can do anything from sign up for my newsletter and get free content to get a $5 worksheet to a $20 journal to group coaching to one-on-one coaching. So there's really something at every price point, at every point of the journey to try and be as inclusive as possible. And right now we have spots open for 2022 for one-on-one coaching. And I'm not sure if I'm bringing back the group coaching in 2022. I launched things very intuitively. And so we did 3 rounds of it this year and it was beautiful. And I almost feel like it's complete. And so, yeah, so right now one-on-one is what we're filling.
Okay. Well, I'm personally going to follow up because I feel like there's so much in this space, especially when it comes to like coaching and mentorship and things like that, that really, I think, leverage a lot of that. I don't like to totally gender things, but like leverage or lean mostly on that kind of masculine, scientific, there's a distinct, concrete way, black and white thinking energy. Whilst I'm familiar with that energy, I definitely feel like the kind of pieces to my puzzle that need to be filled in, and I have a sneaking suspicion for a lot of you listening, same thing, are having more like in reclaiming the soft spots and being able to ease into some of the work that has felt very scary that maybe we've like told ourselves has nothing to do with like how much money we're making or whatever. Really like this kind of reclaiming and integrating all of these aspects of ourselves. I just like fully appreciate you for showing up and doing that. Not only is it deeply transformative for the people that you work with and now me, but also I think that it's a great modeling for how you can show up, lead, create, and have a meaningful impact in a place that is coming from a sense of alignment and understanding of who you are, and not this type of performativity and jumping into a space with the same energy that you think that space necessitates.
Oh, so beautifully said. I feel like that was a mic drop moment.
Yay. Okay, so are you ready for the G-Speed round? Only rule is you cannot overthink it. So what is something people often get wrong about you?
People only think that I'm Arab.
And you're like, I'm a mix, babe.
Yeah.
People usually think I'm one thing, but it's usually the wrong thing. And so then it's a whole nother conversation.
That feels true for me too. Yeah. I get a lot of that. Yeah.
Which is lovely. People just want to claim us, you know? Like there's some sweetness to that.
I kind of play a game with that when people will randomly ask me in the elevator. Everyone's so fascinated about where I'm from. And people will ask me like anywhere, in the elevator, in an Uber, anywhere. And so I play a game. I'm like, if you can get it right in 3 tries, that'll be $100, please. And nobody ever gets it right. Nobody ever gets it right.
Oh my gosh, I love that. I'm totally going to have to steal that. Okay, what is the most dorktacular thing about you?
I love learning. And I'm often reading probably between like 5 and 7 books at a time. I'm a major dork.
Oh my gosh. Now, are you doing hard copy or like Kindle vibes?
Oh, hard copy because this girl has to write in the margins. She's that much of a nerd.
And dog ear the pages?
100%. Yeah.
No, wait, did you have glasses as a kid?
No. So this is one area that my body does not fail me. I have very good eyesight, touch wood.
Because I was going to say, yes, we definitely would have been best friends as kids because I would have brought the dorktacular glasses and then you would have had your big bag of books.
And we would geek out over them.
Yes. Okay, what is the worst piece of advice that you ever got?
Honestly, starting my coaching business when people are like design for the market versus like design from authentically you.
Ugh. Yeah, that resonates. And I feel like we just get that way too much. What is a failure that turned out to be a gift or a perceived failure?
I worked in marketing brand management. Then after that, I started a corporate wellness company and I helped co-found a meditation company. And it was really awesome. We were making all of these products to make meditation easy to begin, fun to keep up, and also great to share. Amazing products. But it was a little bit ahead of its time and there wasn't that much demand for it. But anyway, it got me into coaching because that had to close. And then I was like, what am I going to do with my life? And then I had this bit of an existential crisis, which led to the coaching. So all's well that arrives at coaching.
I'm sure all the lessons that you learned and all the information that you gleaned from that is totally infused into what you're doing.
Absolutely. And it deepened my meditation practice.
Right.
It was wonderful.
Yay. Okay. When you are kind of feeling like, meh, what is a song that you can put on to get you in the high vibe state?
Anything Beyonce, truly. But what is the Beyonce song? Baby, It's You? Or is it You're the One I Need?
Where it has that kind of like,
yeah.
Like, yeah.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Anything Beyonce, though. I mean, ugh.
Yeah, she's a goddess. I like the song, and I can't remember what it is, but like where she's in a yellow Big Bird situation smashing cars from the Lemonade.
Yes, that is such a vibe.
Can I have some of that through osmosis, please?
Yes.
Just straight up injection. Okay, what is a mantra that really resonates with you?
Well, one of my mantras for 2022 that I've been thinking about is raise the standard. So I want to raise the standard on my work. I want to raise the standard on my contribution to society, raise the standard on my impact, raise the standard with my team. Like I want to raise the standard everywhere. So that's just a mantra that is top of heart because we're coming up on the new year.
Okay. What is a question that despite all the interviews you've done, all of that good stuff, nobody has asked you?
I don't know, probably my favorite color. Like, I don't think anyone's ever asked that. I don't know that anybody cares.
What's your favorite color?
Kind of like a purpley blue. It's like a really magical color.
I was totally going to guess purple.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Or like an emerald green.
Ooh, that's nice. Okay. I was going to ask purple because I was like, we're best friends. Wait, can you see it over here?
I love your nails.
Yeah, thank you. I'm very obsessive about nails and nobody manages to do them correctly. And so every time I go into the salon, I'm like deeply disappointed. So I've decided, actually just before this, I was in my hyper-focus hole and I was like, I'm going to order this color so I can do it myself. So it's done perfectly. But then I won't do it because it's like doing it perfect times 10. So, fun mental loops that we go on.
I heard Zendaya does that she feels like people just don't do a great manicure, so she does it all herself.
Okay, so we're not alone in this boat. I like it. Last question. What does it mean to live boldly?
I think to live boldly means to live with the fullness of yourself, to really every room you walk into, to bring every ounce of your being to everything that you are doing, to leave nothing on the table, leave none of you on the table.
Ooh, yeah, I felt that in my solar plexus. Yay! This was so wonderful. You were such a fantastic, amazing human. I'm so grateful for how you're showing up in the world. And thank you for hanging out with us. And I know that everybody is going to be wanting to interact with you. So can you tell us what is the best way for people engaged to find you and your work online?
Beautiful. Well, thank you so much for having me. You are incredible. This has been such a joyful conversation and the beautiful way to end the week. Your energy is divine, and I'm so grateful that you shared it with me.
Thank you.
You can follow along on Instagram at Amina AlTai. I'm sure spelling will be in the show notes, coming back to our very first conversation. You can also visit my website at aminaaltai.com. And if you are interested in one-on-one coaching, I invite you to schedule a clarity call. It would be so beautiful to connect with you all.
Thank you so much. You're literally the best.
As are you, sister.